arrangements for a limited supply of locally raised live chickens. In Indonesia, the search teams locate another suspected part of the AirAsia wreckage. And 8 crew members missing after a cargo ship capsized off Scotland.
Good evening. Search and rescue crews hunting for the wreckage of an AirAsia passenger jet have located a 5th object underwater. It's another clue pointing to the final resting place of Flight 8501. So far, 31 bodies have been recovered from last week's crash. James Aiken reports.
1 week after it disappeared mid-flight, searchers have spotted another object on the ocean floor that could be part of the AirAsia jet. It's close to other large objects, the biggest of which is 18 meters long. Search officials say divers managed to reach the suspected wreck site early this morning, but had to turn back almost immediately because of strong currents and near-zero visibility. Searchers are hoping to visually confirm the objects as part of the fuselage of the jetliner. What caused the Airbus A320 to go down with 162 people aboard remains unclear, but an Indonesian government report says it appears the plane was trapped in bad weather that would have been difficult to avoid. Aviation experts say the more passengers, luggage, and parts of the aircraft that remain intact, the more likely it is the plane hit the water in one piece. That would signal problems like a mechanical error or a stall instead of a mid-air breakup due to an explosion or sudden depressurization. While the plane's flight data and cockpit voice recorders have yet to be located, the discovery of the wreckage will be a huge step in the investigation. An Indonesian-led multinational task force of ships, planes, and helicopters scouring the northern Java Sea and coastline of southern Borneo has also spotted suspected plane parts scattered on beaches. At one church in Surabaya, services will never be the same again. 46 members from 14 families of the church's congregation were on board the doomed plane. At Jakarta's main airport, another member of that congregation prepares for a flight to Singapore.
I'll be lying if I say I'm not afraid, but this spray I always spray when I'm traveling. I don't know what could happen on the plane, but miracles still exist.
James Aiken, TVB News.
The U.S. Embassy in Indonesia has issued a security alert for its citizens in Surabaya. The embassy said on its website that it was made aware of a potential threat against U.S.-associated hotels and banks in Indonesia's second biggest city. The embassy recommends heightened vigilance and awareness of one's surroundings when visiting such facilities. Indonesian authorities have raised concerns in recent months over hundreds of its nationals attempting to travel to Syria and Iraq to fight alongside Islamic State militants.
Small number of locally grown chickens will hit the market this week after last week's bird flu scare on the mainland caused live poultry supplies in Hong Kong to be suspended. In an interview with TVB today, Secretary for Food and Health Ko Wing-man said local poultry market players need to compromise on bird flu contingency plans if Hong Kong is to keep a steady supply of live poultry in the future. João de Silva reports.
From farmers to wholesalers across the live poultry supply chain, different stakeholders hold different views on the government's avian flu response mechanism. At a TVB talk show this morning, Secretary for Food and Health Ko Wing-man said that if everyone holds their ground, it may be hard to maintain a steady supply of live poultry in the long run. He also dismissed suggestions that Hong Kong should rely solely on locally grown chickens. At stake is a government arrangement in response to a bird flu scare in Guangdong province, in which all local chickens must undergo inspection at a Tak Wu Ling checkpoint. Ko stressed that the government is taking into account the views of different stakeholders and that some changes to the contingency plan may be introduced soon in order to accommodate them.
The chicken farmers have raised certain suggestions regarding the mode of operation in the Takuling site. If the department find this new arrangement acceptable, and if the arrangement at least have the understanding of the local residents, then I'm hopeful that this, at least in a smaller scale, could be put to a test sometime within this week.
With 210,000 chickens ready to hit the market, local poultry farmers grew increasingly anxious after wholesalers threatened to suspend trading until imports from the mainland resume. The traders are dissatisfied with the government demand that locally grown chickens taken to the Takuling site for inspection are not loaded onto different trucks to be taken to different retailers. They say using the same truck to cover the entire supply chain from the farm to the retailer via the inspection point is just not practical. Also nervous are villagers in Takuling. This resident said she not only fears exposure to avian flu, but she's also unhappy about the traffic and smell caused by trucks bringing in poultry for inspection. In order to dispel fears among villagers, Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department staff will be in Takuling tomorrow to explain the inspection procedure. And on Tuesday, Food and Health Bureau officials will meet with their AFCD counterparts to discuss a new inspection method under which, instead of being unloaded, poultry consignments will be checked while still on the trucks. The procedure would see poultry moved between trucks using the vehicle's tail lifts without touching the ground, fulfilling the government's earlier promise to residents there that the birds would not be unloaded at the site. Live poultry supply to local markets should resume by Wednesday with a small amount of locally grown chickens. João da Silva, TVB News.
There was more debate today over Basic Law Committee member Albert Chen's political reform proposal, which would allow voters to veto a chief executive candidate by casting a blank vote. While one pro-establishment lawmaker says the proposal is not a positive way to implement universal suffrage in CE elections, a student group is firmly against it. Evelina Leung reports.
Under Basic Law Committee member Albert Chen's proposal, if voters are not happy with any of the chief executive candidates in future CE elections under universal suffrage, they would be able to tick the none of the above box in their voting ballots. And if these none of the above votes exceed 50%, then the election will be voided. Today, legislator Ip Kok Him of the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong does not think this is a positive way to implement universal suffrage in future chief executive elections. Student group Scholarism, meanwhile, firmly stated they are against Chen's proposal.
Actually, people who support democracy still cannot involve in a CE election, and just only the people who support the government and the pro-government side can finally become the chief executive of Hong Kong. Therefore, scholarism do not agree. Scholarism do not agree to the idea of Professor Albert Chen.
Evelina Lang, TVB News.
More tragedy on the high seas. 8 crew members are missing after their cargo ship capsized off the north coast of Scotland. The crew of a passing ferry alerted authorities after it saw the upturned hull of the Cypriot-registered cargo ship. A fleet of lifeboats and helicopters spent all day Saturday combing the seas, but so far no sign of life has been found. It is believed the 83-meter vessel was carrying cement bound for the west coast of the UK. The search for the missing crew is expected to continue at daybreak. The ferry that caught fire while traveling between Greece and Italy a week ago is now docked at the Italian port of Brindisi. The stubborn fire on board, which has claimed at least 11 lives, is hampering efforts to search the vessel for missing passengers. Greek authorities believe as many as 19 people are still unaccounted for, while the Italian prosecutor leading that investigation said the figure could be even higher. For a second straight day, fierce heat from a slow-burning blaze has kept firefighters from searching for passengers now feared dead aboard the Norman Atlantic ferry. The lead investigator says it's not safe to risk more lives with such highly combustible conditions. The ferry set sail a week ago from Patras in Greece to the Italian city of Ancona when, for reasons still unknown, it suddenly caught fire. Passengers describe being caught between the burning heat of the fire below deck and the freezing rain and huge waves above deck. Survivors claim they had to fight for spaces in lifeboats and helicopter baskets as the overwhelmed crew scrambled in the chaos. It took more than 2 days to get all 477 survivors to safety. Rescuers extracted most of them via helicopter. Greek authorities have listed 19 passengers as missing. But investigators are certain more bodies will turn up since illegal migrants often hide as stowaways on board. Vehicles in the ferry's car deck are still burning inside. That's where port officials believe the fire first broke out, and once the smoke clears, more bodies will be found.
We can only hope that we will not be confronted with a real tragedy.
Relatives of the missing are certain what's left of the vessel is a floating tomb. Still, this woman begged authorities to find her missing family. The only good news is the ship's black box recorder has been salvaged. This survivor's testimony will be critical. He witnessed the fire break out and claims the ferry's emergency alarms failed to sound off. But until all questions are answered, the captain, owner and operator of the ship, as well as 3 crew members, have been placed under investigation. Smoke still belching from the wreckage of the ferry is a devastating predicament. Worse yet, there's still no way of knowing how many people remain unaccounted for.
Grievances were set aside for grieving as New York City police officers saluted Mayor Bill de Blasio at the wake for the second of 2 officers killed in an ambush last month. Ahead of the wake for Officer Liu Wenjian, Police Commissioner Bill Bratton told his force to refrain from the act of disrespect seen at the funeral of Liu's partner last Sunday. That's when many officers turned their backs on de Blasio in a gesture of disdain for his criticisms of police policies. Liu, who was 32, and 40-year-old Rafael Ramos were shot to death last month as they sat in their patrol car in Brooklyn. The shooter, who killed himself soon after the attack, had said he was seeking to avenge the deaths this summer of 2 unarmed black men at the hands of police officers. Liu is believed to be New York's first Chinese-American officer killed in the line of duty.
One of Greece's most wanted fugitives was captured yesterday, nearly a year after the convicted Marxist extremist failed to return to prison while on furlough. Christodoulos Zeros was arrested in Athens. He was serving 6 life terms plus 25 years for his role in killing 23 people between 1975 and 2000. His victims included Greek politicians, businessmen, and British, American, and Turkish diplomats and military officials. The 56-year-old had disguised his appearance. He had dyed his hair blonde, grown a beard, and was wearing glasses. A search in his hideout turned up 7 AK-47 rifles, a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, and explosives. Weeks after he vanished in 2014, he released a video criticizing Greece's financial crisis and vowed to attack politicians and journalists. And still to come in our news, many subdivided flat tenants overcharge for their electricity consumption. A fire destroys a 600-year-old building in Yunnan province. And the first large-scale military parade in Myanmar